All right, thank you everyone so much for joining today's briefing from the Illinois Environmental Council. This is for our individual members who are supportive of IEC. I see a lot of friends and volunteers from all over the state, and I'm so pleased that you're here to learn more about what we intend to move forward on our legislative agenda. And with me today, I do want to point out that we have several IEC staff members, including Jeff Sheldon, and I'm also going to have Elliot Clay and R.L. Hampton, who are part of our legislative team, who are our legislative leads, talk about some of the things that they have been working on. So I am very excited about this year, and I'm going to share a presentation and walk us through it. So ignore that I have 20 million tabs open. Got the presentation open. All right. So again, thanks everybody so much for being here. A lot of you all are supporters of the Illinois Environmental Council, and you know the work that we do. But just for a quick refresher, we're working. We're working to safeguard Illinois, its people, its plants and animals, and the natural systems on which all life depends, by building power for people and the environment. And part of our building power is making sure our supporters like you know what our priorities are before anybody else does. So we're gonna go through some of those, but I do want to start just, especially compared to anywhere we've been since 1975, I think that 2021 was our most impactful year ever. I am just so impressed when I look back at what we are able to accomplish. And I don't know that we're going to be able to meet anything like that this year. But I look forward to huge accomplishments in the future after all of the things that we have worked on. So I do want to do a really quick 2021 year in review, so you know a little bit about the big things we accomplished. And of course, the biggest thing is the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act. And I have a whole hour-long presentation on this. I just have a few slides here, but I want to address some of the things that ended up in the bill that passed the Illinois General Assembly and was signed by the governor on September 15th, and that we are going through implementation right now. And I should say, if anybody has a question, if you can save that through the end, if I do see it in the chat, I will maybe try to address it, but let's save the questions to the end. Or just put them in the chat when you think of them, and we will answer all questions at the end. I also would welcome people to put their name and the area of the state that they're coming from into the chat. So thank you. Again, Climate and Equitable Jobs Act passed the Illinois General Assembly, signed into law. It puts Illinois on a path to 100% renewable energy by 2050, with goals at 40% by 2030 and 50% by 2040. It does transition us away from fossil fuels, closing all coal and natural gas plants or converting them by 2045, with many environmental justice plants closing by 2030. Just in anticipation of this legislation, we did see some major plant closures scheduled for the next couple of years, including the Waukegan plant, which is in an environmental justice community, and the plant near Joliet. So we are transitioning away from fossil fuels in the power sector. We fixed the solar cliff. Solar businesses are up and running. There's a new green school solar program that's really exciting. We include a number of items on just transition. And the exciting part about this bill, and I'm actually not sure if this is another slide, but we just really look at from start to finish how we bring equity and jobs into the bill. So we have a whole number of workforce hubs that are part of the bill. And even as we go into those workforce hubs, we provide programs that provide a safety net for people who are entering into job training programs so that they're able to succeed. We had previously, through the Future Energy Jobs Act, created new job training programs. And a lot of those new job training programs were people had barriers to employment and barriers to staying in the workforce, things like childcare, books, all of those sorts of things that we were able to remove. And that was really exciting. So that's the workforce stuff, which I actually think is another slide, but it also goes to this, which is making sure that we have support for communities that are within the areas where any power plants are closing, creating new energy transition community grants, a displaced workers bill of rights. Just to give an example, not a lot of people know at the end of 2019, a quarter of Illinois' coal capacity closed. And when those plants, most of them owned by Texas-based Vistra, closed, those workers were given 30 or 60-day notice that they no longer had a job. And that's not the sort of thing that we want to see. We want them to have notice. We want them to, these communities to not be devastated by these plants closing, and giving them new opportunities to invest in renewable energy and storage at existing sites. I talked a little bit about workforce equity, but this goes from start to finish, from jobs training to investment in businesses that are owned by diverse owners, a returning residence program for those who are incarcerated and those who have been released, 35 million in business development grants, really exciting. And then utility accountability to make up for what ComEd and Exelon did in terms of corruption. I mean, we have seen corruption in the energy sector lead to climate change, and we need to be in front of addressing it. And so a little bit on utility accountability that is within it. Also, last year was a big year in terms of our biggest water quality problem, which is polluted runoff from farm fertilizer. Nutrient pollution such as nitrates and phosphates are a tremendous problem in the state, just choking off a number of our large waterways and creating water pollution that is incredibly problematic and costly, really dangerous for young children. And we worked last year to double the amount that was available for the Partners for Conservation funds, which just was huge. Doubled this very successful fall covers for spring savings program, and we're hoping that we'll have an increase in that again. Better funding for the soil and water conservation districts, which are really the grassroots entity that addresses this problem and takes local questions, and $1 million to IEPA to oversee a new nutrient loss reduction strategy effort. We'll have more on what we're doing this year. And of course, last year, we were the second state in the nation to pass a bill to require all lead service lines to be replaced. There is no safe level of lead in drinking water for our children, especially. And this bill requires us to find where all of our lead service lines are and then replace them over time. It's a graduated scale. Some may have 5 years, some may have decades, like the city of Chicago, but we are going to be on a path of replacing all of our lead service lines, which is, it's going to be a big job creator, but also in terms of water, drinking water quality is not the only thing that we care about here, because we do want to get lead out of our drinking water. That's a top priority, but we're putting phosphates into our drinking water to make sure that the lead doesn't leach into water. And so that's something that if we didn't have lead service lines, we wouldn't have to be doing. But also there's a lot of leaky pipes, and those leaky pipes, because we haven't replaced infrastructure in so long, are incredibly problematic for like trees and tree roots that get into your service lines. It's wasting water. All of these things are incredibly problematic, and we're really excited to have this in place. We also, I put these last things here. They aren't as big of accomplishments, but they're still big. We finally made some progress on a couple of toxics issues that we've been working on for a long time. And then we're going to talk about PFAS a little later on in what we're doing this year. But per and polyfluoroalkyl substances are this group of toxic man-made chemicals that are called forever chemicals because they don't degrade, they end up in people's bodies, and they're linked to several different health impacts, including thyroid disorders, diabetes, all of these things that we've listed here. And we have had contaminated groundwater in several places in Illinois. So last year, we were able to pass a bill that reduced PFAS by looking at firefighting foam, with a phase out date, with just switches for fire departments, but there's still more that we have to do here. And we'll talk about a piece that we're addressing this year. Illinois chapter, the Sierra Club especially, has been a leader in working with us on this. And then finally, another thing that's, this is something we were working on for 10 years, not as big of a bill, but coal tar sealants are a type of, it's what you put on your driveway. And it leads driveway or parking lots and stuff, and it causes really high levels of polyaromatic hydrocarbons that are incredibly dangerous for children, are carcinogens that new research has shown we track into our houses, and they accumulate at the bottom of different small water bodies. So really problematic, and Minnesota has banned them. We'd love to move towards that in Illinois, but for now we have some disclosure and some work towards replacing that. And that took us a very long time. The coal tar sealant industry in Illinois is very strong. So with that, I'm really excited to talk about our 2022 priorities and tell you more about what we plan to address. So the biggest bill that we will be working on is environmental justice. And this is House Bill 4093, Senate Bill 2906. I'm going to talk a little bit about what's in it. And this is a bill that was written by the Chicago Environmental Justice Network and their attorneys, which includes 6 Chicago-based, community-based environmental justice organizations. And we are supporting their work in this. This is our top priority for the year. I think many of you have heard about situations like General Iron, which is a polluting facility moving from the white wealthy neighborhood of Lincoln Park to a middle-class Black and brown neighborhood on the southeast side of Chicago. And despite that they've had several violations and implosions and such like that, they're trying to move. And that is incredibly problematic from an environmental justice perspective. There's also the matte asphalt plant in McKinley Park, just right next to a school. We've heard more about the Hilco facility and an implosion that happened at a coal plant there. Plus just looking at the city of Chicago, looking at the state of Illinois, and how we locate our biggest sources of air pollution in communities of color that are low income. Those are the communities that can least stand the pollution that we're giving them. And we're increasing their burden all the time. And so how do we make sure that those communities really have a say in what's going into their area and understand what type of pollution is coming in? So this creates the first definition of environmental justice that would be in the IEPA Act. We use the same definition that we used for the Solar for All program, and there's a portion for self-designation, which is really important. We require translation services automatically at public hearings. The big part here are these 2 next ones, that it requires large air pollution facilities to go through a local siting process, which really strongly involves local government. So it creates something where local governments can deny a facility because of its air permit. And part of that process too is this cumulative impact review, which is not done in the air sector anywhere else. There's sort of equivalents within water and land, but in the air sector, there's not. And so this would look at what else is in the area that's nearby that's contributing to bad air pollution. And if you add this in, will it make the air unhealthy for local people to breathe? And so that's going to be the first time we've looked at that and reviewed that. And it requires companies to show that they're not going to have a cumulative impact that will be harmful to the people in the neighborhood. It gives community members more standing to challenge these decisions. It creates a project bank in these environmental justice communities that require that if there's fines, they go to these projects chosen by the community. I've heard a lot of things where like there'd be an air pollution violation and then they go fix lead service lines in another community. And that's not fixing the harm that's been caused by that fine. And then there's also a process to protect classes for those civil rights violations. We have additional environmental justice bills we've been working on with different communities. And I'll talk about the first one, and then I'm going to pitch this off to Ariel, and I might look at some of your questions a little bit. But we are working on a bill to ban incineration of PFAS. We don't support House Bill 4818. It was drafted with some language from industry that the community doesn't support. And so we don't support it as written, but we're hoping that it can get better. But this was a bill that passed unanimously last year, and then there were some issues found late in the game. And so we'll be working on that bill this year. And then we have a couple of bills about coal plants that are going to close, and I'm going to pass that off to Ariel.
Thanks, Jen. Hello, everyone. So the first bill I'll talk about is the coal ash disposal bill. This is HB 4358 and SB 3073 from Representative Mayfield and Senator Johnson. This bill would require NRG to clean up all of the coal ash that is on the site in Waukegan in order to protect our biggest source of drinking water, Lake Michigan. And then the second bill that I'll talk about is our thermal plant demolition bill. Some of you all may know about SB 1920, which was a bill that we passed last year that is essentially just a notice requirement. So the new bill would do a few things, such as expand our current notice requirements and prompt updates when those plans change for demolitions. It would also give true engagement opportunities to communities and require IEPA to review and be present for both the public hearing and the demolition itself. And I think I'm passing it back.
Thanks so much. And just heading into the next portions that we'll be working on, we're going to be doing a lot on conservation. We'll talk about budget issues related to conservation later, but here are a few categories. And I think I'll have Elliot talk about all of them.
Cool. Thank you, Jen. Yeah, so we've got a few kind of exciting conservation bills this year. I'll start with the top left on pesticide restrictions. House Bill 1847 is a bill we actually introduced last year that is currently on second reading in the House. It bans the use of pre-treated seeds in ethanol production. This is a result of a situation that happened in Nebraska where an ethanol plant had used seeds that were treated with neonics, dicamba, other pesticides, and the use of ethanol or ethanol production, and it created a very nasty situation for a town out there. A lot of water, air pollution, and a lot of other things. So we just want to prevent that kind of practice from happening in Illinois. House Bill 4558, also from Representative Gazzardi, really sets some good restrictions on the use of neonics on state property. It also makes neonic pesticides a restricted use pesticide under the law, meaning that it would not be available to the general public for purchase, which is definitely something that we would want. And then lastly, on the pesticide front, House Bill 4363 is a flat ban on the use of dicamba in Illinois. This is really a conversation starter, sort of a bill. We have a feeling that the federal government is going to be taking action on this from the federal EPA at some point soon too. So we really just wanted to kind of start a dialogue with most of the agricultural industry about the impacts of this pesticide on natural areas in Illinois, but also people's lawns and lawn care products and those kind of things. So we're interested to keep that conversation going. Next, nutrient loss reduction that Jen had started touching on a bit, but this bill, Senate Bill 3471 from Senator Villabalom, is kind of an expansion of what we were able to do last year with getting money in the budget for nutrient loss, but this is going to really direct how it can be spent. This is going to be really a coordinating effort from the Department of Ag and Soil and Water Conservation districts to start implementing nutrient loss reduction plans on like a watershed level throughout Illinois. This is a super exciting way to create some accountability because Illinois has not been making progress on the nutrient loss reduction strategy. In fact, the latest report that came out this last year shows up to 15 to 20% increases in nitrogen and phosphorus in Illinois since they started tracking this stuff. So we're not going in the right direction. And hopefully this will be a way to address that. Then this last category, open space. House Bill 5066 and Senate Bill 3724 that are really trying to go at the issues around liability with prescribed fires in Illinois for prairie burns. Right now, it's legal for people to do prairie burns in like a controlled setting and with like licensed folks, but getting insurance coverage for those practices is difficult because of the way that liability is laid out in the law. So we're hoping to be able to address that to make it easier for conservation professionals to do this important work. And then lastly, House Bill 5067 from Representative Butler creates a conservation practitioner license under the Illinois Pesticide Act. This is really trying to get at, right now, Illinois pesticide laws, and to become a licensed applicator, you have to go through a lot of hoops. But that law is almost geared exclusively towards agricultural production and not conservation management, because there's a number of pesticides and herbicides that are used by conservation professionals in eradicating invasive species in Illinois that have much different kind of expectations than maybe a normal pesticide license would. So this is an attempt to kind of create their own niche in the law, which would definitely be helpful for them to not jump as many hoops. Yeah, and I think with that, I'll hand it back over to Jen.
Great, thanks. And I keep moving over too quickly. So I do think, and I would point in the chat, we had put a link if you wanted to take action on the environmental justice air permitting bill, and also a link to file a witness slip on that bill. We're definitely asking as many individuals as possible to file a slip. So just look back in the chat for some of that info, or check some of our emails. We definitely would appreciate your publicity on that one. We do have a few pieces of climate legislation that we're moving forward. I'll talk about a few of them and then pitch one back to Ariel. But one of the things that we sort of learned as, I mean, I kind of knew, but I learned in full when the CEJA debate was happening last year, is that the Capitol complex, which includes the Illinois State Capitol, as well as several buildings in the area, are heated by a coal-fired boiler. And so we have introduced legislation that would require these boilers to be replaced and closed. We're working with the Secretary of State's office on some language now. Hopefully they do it way before 2030, but we have a set for 2030 right now. So this is a bill to move forward on that. We're also working to expand electric vehicle charging infrastructure. The focus of this bill, and there's a new amendment, would require the construction of new residential property to be EV ready. We're also looking at adding some things that would remove the ability, like a lot of local governments are taking their sweet time to approve permits for EV charging infrastructure. So how do we expedite that process will be really important. And then the last one on here is the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act workforce fix. There's a small drafting error that requires a 2-word edit. House Bill 4390, this bill is actually up in committee tomorrow. So definitely would appreciate everybody's support on that one as well, but it will help protect the workforce programs. And then another issue that's been kind of interesting, and Representative Bob Morgan is addressing it, is this gas storage leak. And so I'm going to let Ariel talk about that, as well as the recent new TV report on it.
Thanks, Jen. Yes. So this legislation is based on a series of reports from WCIA about leaks from an underground storage facility that impacted Livingston and LaSalle counties in 2020. So this bill would require owners and operators to create and adhere to procedures for verified leaks, including monitoring requirements and installation of gas and water separators. Rep. Morgan introduced this bill last year, which stalled after leaving committee, and the current language will be amended. And as Jen mentioned, there was a recent report on this by, again, WCIA, and they are correlating the recent rate hike that NICOR requested with the Illinois Commerce Commission to some of the new systems that they put in to deal with these leaks. And I will pass it back to Jen.
Yeah, so thanks for your work on that. Waste issues are going to be really big this year. I don't know that there's going to be much forward progress, but I do want to talk about several of the items that are under discussion. I do think that we may actually, for the first time in 3 years, pass the Illinois Drug Take Back Act. And this has been a really interesting one. It would require pharmaceutical companies to fund some of the disposal of Illinois drug takebacks. And it's been a really interesting one in terms of politics, because we've really been working with the retailers on this bill. And part of what motivated this one is retailers like Walgreens and CVS are paying for drug take back, and they think that they should have some support from the pharmaceutical companies that are manufacturing the drugs as well. And so this will require, so we partnered with the retailers to write this bill. And I think that we have reached some agreement on it. That's not an official announcement, but I think we're getting there. And so we may move that bill as early as Wednesday with an agreed amendment on it. And it will need some work in the future, but we're going to see how the program starts off and how many sites come out of it. And then we'll keep working on it. But that one is really important. And I'm going to skip the next one and give that one to Ariel as well. But the bottom two, we've been working as part of the Coalition for Plastic Reductions on 2 different bills. One of them would ban the use of styrofoam in Illinois, and the other is a plastics reduction bill that includes a plastic bag ban, carry-out bag fee, single-use plastic by request only in restaurants, and a ban on single-use plastics at the state fairs, state parks, and higher education places. We are focused this year on getting the styrofoam ban bill moved. It may require some push next year as well. We've been working on that, especially with Illinois PIRG. That one's going to be important. And I will say with all of this, there is a container deposit bill that's out there. There's going to be another one introduced. There's also some work on extended producer responsibility and setting up a program for the state on extended producer responsibility for packaging, and a carpet recycling bill. I don't think we're going to see any of those things really advance this year, but I do think that this area is heating up quite a bit and that we could see a lot of movement in recycling next year. But these are important bills to talk about this year. But I will point to you my favorite bill of the year, which I'm going to pass to Ariel because she did a lot of the work around it, which is composting of human remains. So Ariel, go ahead.
Thanks, Jen. So this is HB 4552 from Rep. Cassidy. So this legislation would allow natural organic reduction, also known as human composting, as a sustainable, low emission, end of life option. And passage of this bill would make Illinois the 4th state to offer this option to people. So this is one of our lovely waste issues, covering one of our lovely waste issues for this year.
Great. And I saw a question in the chat about organic waste being banned from landfills. And we do have a landfill ban on yard waste that is not enforced within the state, which is really problematic. It's something that we need to work on, but that's been around since the 90s. And it needs better enforcement. And then Senate Bill 1167 was introduced last year that would ban food scraps from landfills and require a lot of food donation. We do support that bill, but it is going to take a few years to get that one done for sure. That one, it had one of the things that we're concerned about too, that we want to see pick up, is the number of sites where you can take food scrap composting. So we do need to make sure that we have the infrastructure in place before we have a full organics ban. And we're not as close to that as we'd like to be. Commercial food scrap composting really only became legalized in 2009 in Illinois. And so we've been really working on increasing the opportunities there. So waste issues are going to be really important this year, and we're going to continue to work on them. And then we're going to go to a couple other questions at the end here. But I want to pass this off to close a little bit. So start thinking about your questions, putting them in the chat, and we'll take them in the order they were given. And I'm sure I'll come up with some more stories to tell as we go ahead. But I'm going to pass it a little bit to Elliot to talk about where we are expecting the budget to go and what will happen this week, because on Wednesday is the state of the state and the governor's budget address.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. So as you can tell from this slide, it's a little sparse, and honestly, it's because there's a lot we don't know yet. As Jen said, the governor is going to give his state of the state and budget address at noon on Wednesday. When they do that, they will release their official guidance for what the governor would like to see in a budget. And from there, we'll be able to kind of give some breakdowns and give some status updates to folks about what we're seeing in there. We have heard some kind of rumor mill churning about some things that will be announced Wednesday, and it sounds like these have basically been confirmed. One, it sounds like that there is going to be a freeze on basically the motor fuel tax for the time being. They usually try to get it to match with inflation, so it goes up, I think, like 2 cents every year or something like that, but they were going to freeze that this year, I think, in the interest of just general anxieties around inflation. It sounds like there's also going to be a tax holiday for certain kind of sales tax that happens in Illinois. I think it's like a 1% currently right now, but they may get rid of that and recoup the cost for local governments of any lost revenue from that being basically put on a holiday, essentially. But in the end, it sounds like the governor's going to be really interested in doing just general tax cuts for the middle and lower class as part of his announcement this year. But like we said, we'll know more Wednesday, and we'll be able to give you breakdowns of agency funding and those kind of things. Generally, what we're really wanting is just sustained or increased funding for the agencies that really we care about a lot. So the Department of Natural Resources, Department of Ag, EPA, all those folks, we really want to see their programs continue. And that includes soil and water conservation districts and all these different programs that were created under CEJA, and a myriad of other things that we want to make sure are well funded for next year. But yeah, with that, I'll hand it back to Jen.
Great. Yeah, and this is some information about the federal budget that we posted from Brian Gill, our federal policy director, as Elliot ended here. We just really want to make sure that any federal money that's coming that is available, Illinois takes. And we have a bad history of not doing that, which is super problematic. So we want to make sure that we're focused on that. And then the climate bill that is being considered, if Build Back Better is cut into pieces, it's going to be really important for the implementation of the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act and other green initiatives within the state. So it is something that we're really tracking as well. And one of the things from this, there's a ton of money for road and bridge improvement. And we've seen a lot of road widening that has been announced. And of course, road widening, not the greatest for climate solutions. You widen a road and you will see traffic fill that road. It doesn't make the traffic go faster. It just makes more cars on the road. And so we are really working to support climate-driven solutions, which includes electrification of the transportation sector, public transportation, walking and biking. So how do we support all of those things as much as possible, starting with that kind of what I mentioned first, which is the active transportation and making that safe and accessible. So those are all some things that we're working on. And then this is our nice staff. Thank you so much for supporting us here at IEC. And I'm happy to take any questions. But yeah, so let me talk a little bit about some of these at the bottom first, and then we'll go in here. But yes, February 18th is our virtual lobby day. So please sign up, because we will be setting meetings with state lawmakers that day or days around it. So please save that date, and we will set you up with a meeting with your lawmaker virtually. We know we are going to be working on the environmental justice air permitting bill, and we hope to have the other bills decided by next Monday. Some of them are a little in flux because committee deadline was last week, but we may be working on talking about the workforce development programs in CEJA. We may be working on PFAS incineration. We may be working on some of the coal plant demolition and coal ash bills. So those are going to be some of our priorities this year for sure, but it's definitely going to be focused on environmental justice this time. We may do some more lobby days in March, especially around water issues like the Partners for Nutrient Loss Reduction Act. So check it out, but we're excited to work with you. I'm excited to go back to an in-person lobby day soon, maybe next year. I don't think that's going to happen this year, though, just because of the spike in COVID. So we had a question about Robin Gable's bill about the mosquito eradication business. And so there was a pyrethroid ban that is House Bill 3118 that was introduced by Robin Gable. That bill is in committee Tuesday with an amendment. Elliot, do you want to add anything there?
Yeah, and I think that they were asking specifically that amendment language that is being considered for committee tomorrow at 5 is adding the restrictions that were mentioned in there about mosquito abatement. I think that we are supportive of that legislation, though I will say it could definitely be stronger. But like in theory, I do think it's in a pretty good place. And if you do care about pesticide overuse, it's definitely a bill worth supporting for sure.
Huh. And then we had a question about pet waste being acceptable for compost sites because of the dog boom during COVID. I could talk to you about compost literally for hours, but just one of the things with any pet waste of an animal that eats anything that is meat, it is not recommended that you compost in your backyard or in small sites because the temperatures don't get hot enough to kill any potential parasites or other things that the pet may have ingested. But pet waste is acceptable in large scale commercial sites because the temperatures do get high enough. They do test it afterward. There's less risk and exposure. So yes, when we have more composting sites, commercial composting definitely will accept things like pet waste. But generally, it does not go into backyards or small garden compost sites because of that risk. But yep, that is something that would be part of what we do if we had more organics pick up. And then we don't have anything on smoke detector disposal, and I need to do a lot more work on that. I'm aware of the radiation from the smoke detectors and how that needs proper disposal. I think that one of the things that we may be working on with a smoke detector with extended producer responsibility is sort of, we have several different types of producer responsibility within the state right now. So one of our biggest laws is the electronic waste recycling law, which we have revamped a couple of times. There's also a bill about mercury thermostat disposal. We have a bunch proposed on things like paint and carpet. And one of the things, and last year we introduced a manufacturer responsibility law about car seats and other plastics that can't be reused, because a lot of people don't like throwing out that whole car seat, but really you're supposed to do that if you've been in an accident, for example, or between children. So we are hoping to maybe have something that is a standard policy for extended producer responsibility for a lot of different things to make sure that hazardous waste and other wastes are taken care of properly. But look for that. I don't think we're doing that this year, but it is really important. And I'm not aware of any smoke detector legislation from this year. So I had a question in my messages about limestone quarries and the particulate matter that becomes very concentrated and blows off a quarry site, which negatively impacts local areas. So there are dust laws within Illinois that IEPA doesn't enforce as much as they should. I do think that with this issue with dust, enforcement is a really big concern. So making sure that folks are reporting what's happening if there are problems and whether it's violating the law or not. I do think that there's a lot we may need on particulate matter and dust. We worked a lot on that when we worked on pet coke, but a lot of those end up being local concerns. I know IEC would really like to do more on local work and making sure that we're supporting local organizers. We are doing a full lobbying program in the city of Chicago right now, but we don't have the capacity to support local organizing efforts that maybe aren't state-oriented nature. We did a lot on the Belleville Prairie because that was something that impacted our natural areas sites. But that is, I'm not aware of anything on dust regulations this year, but it is something that we could continue to discuss for sure. Yes, and Benjamin brings up a good point about animal waste that has to be in compostable bags. So that is important. And then the timeline for the styrofoam container ban. So we just moved it back a little bit. I think if it passed, the ban would be at the end of 2023 is where we moved it to for low-income restaurants, Elliot. Do you remember? We'll take a look at that bill really quick. Because I know that there is a different time. There's a timeline we started with for larger restaurants, and then there's a longer timeline. Do you know what that is?
Yeah, I would need to look into it, but there is sort of a phased in approach to make sure that this isn't going to unduly impact especially low income businesses and folks that can't necessarily afford a quick switch from polystyrene to another alternative. So they're trying to be proactive about making sure this isn't going to have equity issues when it's enacted.
Yep. Great. So if folks, please continue to put items in the chat. just we are really reviewing a lot of the bills that are out there right now, and there aren't too many that we are opposing at this point. There's a bill about critical infrastructure that's about pipelines that we have opposed several years in the past. That one has been introduced, but we don't expect it to move this year. So that is a bill we expect there to be more force on next year. So we will need assistance in fighting that one. There are some things that we're concerned about with the wind and solar industry about where we're siting wind and how do we make sure we're taking care of the environment while we're siting wind and solar. That's going to be something that's really important. So that those are things that I see that we oppose. There's a couple bills weakening CEJA, but they were put forward by sponsors that are really going to not move them. So that is not a problem. And then I don't know if we have a list of packaging items that contain PFAS, but I'm sure we can find that and provide a link for sure. So thanks for that question. I know we had a full bill that included all types of PFAS in our ban when we started. And now it's we just did firefighting foam. So that was it.
I guess one bill or one list of bills I would add to that I forgot I don't think we touched on yet was CAFO bills that are in the Senate right now that are sponsored by Senator Kaler. I really don't anticipate those moving this year. The Senate is just a kind of a tough cookie, if I'll just be honest. But excited to do that again next year, and hopefully actually get some traction on it.
Yeah, so there's a question about whether the plastic, so the bill we introduced is a plastic bag ban and a carry-out bag tax. So it would tax everything that wasn't a plastic bag. I just got to be honest, in a lot of these waste bills, I do not see a whole lot of possibility of completely getting done this year. And part of that is just businesses have been, well, I mean, grocery stores doing great during the pandemic, restaurants not so much. And I think there's a lot of stress out there, and there's a lot of unwillingness to put new regulations on these businesses. And I also think from our perspective, we are really focused on racial equity and how are we making sure that those businesses that might be low income, might be Black and brown owned, are not unfairly hurt by these type of new regulations that maybe a more wealthy business could handle easier. And so we definitely, I don't see a lot moving in the waste sector this year, but I could see next year being a really big deal in terms of moving forward legislation on waste. So I do think that that's super important. And Karen asked a question about, do you have specific budget priorities for IDNR? I have heard that the budget over there not doing so well, and so there does need to be an increase to DNR for the next fiscal year. So that and I'm working with the department to see if we can get some more information on what that increase should be. But we're definitely going to have to increase funding there. We're also trying to increase the Natural Area Stewardship Act grants, which just went out for the first time this year, from $500,000 to $1 million next year. So that is another priority. And then we also think that the department is not well using the federal funds that are available. So there's conservation corps programs that could be available. There are current land and water conservation fund items that we are not taking advantage of, and that's really frustrating. We got the department some resources with Partners for Conservation on our nutrient loss reduction strategy work, and we're not seeing the Department of Natural Resources take advantage of that as much as Department of Ag. So those are some of our priorities there. I don't know, Elliot, did I miss anything with DNR?
No, I think that that's pretty good. There's also been some concerns raised about just like funding maintenance at state parks, because there are a lot of parks throughout the state that have infrastructure that is like really starting to kind of fall apart. Stuff that has not been touched in decades. So I would hope that there would be something in the budget that does a little bit of an increase for, maintenance issues at parks, but we'll definitely see.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just would, I think this is a fun time too to talk about what happened with the Natural Area Stewardship Act. And that one was really fun because we worked a lot with the Prairie State Conservation Coalition on that bill. And I will say, a lot of our partners were involved with it. and they tried to introduce the bill in maybe 2017 or 2018 and just kept running into roadblocks. And then I think that there was a lot where IEC worked to help guide them out of the process. And the year that we passed it, which I think was 2018, there was a really big effort to shelve it. And so we had to work really hard, and we had a Republican senator, Republican House sponsor that worked so hard to move that bill to make sure that it could move forward. And I'm just so grateful, Senator Barrickman, Representative Bennett, for their work. Like literally, and Leader Curry did at the time did so much to move that forward. And then we had to advocate for it to end up in the budget. And finally, we saw that one come to fruition with the stewardship grants for different areas. So that one was really exciting to see from start to finish the impact that we had on those properties. So are there any other questions in the chat? We can give you 10 minutes back, but I also Elliot Clay is our state programs director. So if there's a question that you have in general about these, Elliot can put his email in the chat. And I will, you also can email me and I'll put my email in the chat, but Elliot might get back to you a lot faster than I do, just because this is something that he's focused on. Elliot and Ariel are both in Springfield in our Springfield office when they are working from the office. And so they are the ones that will be working our bills in Springfield this year. So please get in touch with them. They are both so good. Ariel has been doing a lot of our legal research on bills. Super amazing. And I don't know what we would do without all of Ariel's excellent work, especially on the body composting bill, which is the one I'm most excited about this year. So I hope we get all of that work done. But just wanted to thank all of you again for being members of IEC and for your support of our work. It's really important, helps us get so much done. I don't think we're going to have as big of a year as last year, but I don't think that's possible. And so I'm hopeful that we are going to move some really great priorities this year and spend the rest of the year implementing them. So I am so grateful for all of you. Thanks for joining us. And I don't see any more questions, so we're going to end. I just saw a question about pursuing a graduate course in environmental sustainability. So let me give maybe the folks on here can add some stuff, but let's just give a little bit of career advice on the way out. And I will link in here, or if somebody from our team wants to go to our website, I do have a blog that I wrote on pursuing a career in environmental advocacy. So I don't know that we're going to have summer internships available this year. It's something that we're working on having an internship program. We often have better luck with having interns that are in Springfield in the spring, because that is such an exciting time and we need them to do stuff. But I definitely would say just trying with different environmental organizations, trying internships, figuring out what you like would be really important. But also, advocacy in the career that we do, we have to spend a lot of time on politics as well. So if you want to do advocacy, politics needs to be a key interest of your work. We need to develop, I often say, and this is a little controversial, we'll do our civics for environmentalists lunch and learn a little later, but votes are taken based on values, relationships, and beliefs. Votes aren't taken based on data, facts, and figures. And, you might take that as a little controversial because we want our lawmakers to read science, but they're not doing that. They're relying on other people who have read through information so that they can rely on people like me or Elliot or our affiliate organizations who have read the science, and they trust us to deliver messages to them about what's important and what things that we do. And so advocacy, you got to be really interested in politics, but there are plenty of places that you can be pursuing careers in environmental sustainability that aren't lobbying like we're doing, just in terms of you can be a chef that works on sustainability. You can have, be somebody who is in corporate sustainability. You can be any profession and going after sustainability for sure. But just for for some background, I went to U of I for my in natural resources and environmental science for my bachelor's, master's, and law degree. And Elliot went to, I don't know actually. Elliot, where'd you go?
I got my undergrad just in political science from Edwardsville, which led to me working at like a Jimmy John's for 2 months. And I was like, that's not going to work. So I got my master's in public administration at UIS and worked at the Senate, where I kind of cut my teeth on all the policy stuff and everything. So maybe not a traditional route into sustainable kind of environmental work and stuff, but got here nonetheless.
Yeah, and Ariel, where'd you go?
I had a more traditional route. So I went to Colgate University. I have a degree in environmental geology, and I went to the University of Maine School of Law for my JD with a focus in environmentalism.
Nice. So yeah, definitely there's a lot of schools out there doing some great work right now, and we posted our blog in there. Happy to help folks pursue careers. We need way more of you. We have a lot of job openings right now. I'll tell folks we've got islandbiro.org/careers. We have a development director position, 2 energy positions, although we're close to filling those. And we'll have maybe one in sustainable agriculture in the downstate area available soon. So check that out. I know there's a lot of openings right now. And I'll put my email in the chat. You guys could just feel free to connect with any of us about all of this work. So thanks, Jeff, for putting that in there. And don't forget to take action on the environmental justice air permitting bill. And with that, I just want to thank all of you so much for attending. We've recorded this and we'll make it available to our other members. And again, thanks for your support, and definitely encourage you to keep supporting us. islandbiro.org/donate is where you can go and increase your donation to IEC. We definitely need all your support, so we don't have to worry about raising more money. We can just focus on the work in Springfield and getting things done. And I think you've shown last year we were incredibly effective, and we want to keep going. So thank you all so much for your support, and have a great afternoon.